The torches of Arendor's great sanctum burned like 1,000 captured suns. Seren pressed her spine against the cold marble of the western gallery, her fingers shaking where they gripped the velvet curtain. Below her, the assembled nobility of 5 kingdoms filled the ceremonial hall, their whispered conversations rising like smoke toward the vaulted ceiling. She should not have come. Every rational thought screamed at her to retreat, to return to the hidden corridor behind the kitchens where she had spent 3 days waiting for word that never arrived. But Varen's silence had become a living thing, a creature that gnawed at her chest until she could no longer breathe through the weight of it. So she had stolen a servant's cloak and slipped through passages she knew too well, climbing to this forbidden perch where shadows swallowed her completely. The sovereign's claim. She had heard the phrase whispered among the kitchen staff for weeks. The ancient rite that bound an Alpha King to his chosen queen before the eyes of gods and wolves alike. A ceremony that happened once in a generation, sometimes less. A ceremony Varen had never mentioned to her. Her gaze found him without conscious thought, the way water finds the sea. He stood upon the raised dais at the hall's northern end, his broad shoulders wrapped in ceremonial black and crimson. Even from this distance she could see the sharp angles of his jaw, the dark hair that fell across his brow, the powerful stillness that made wolves twice his age lower their eyes in instinctive submission. For 8 months, she had known another version of this man. The one who traced constellations across her bare shoulder with calloused fingertips. The one who laughed quietly against her throat when she mispronounced words in the old tongue. The one who had pressed his mouth to the secret place behind her ear and whispered words that still echoed through her dreams. When the council's negotiations conclude, he had promised, his breath warm against her skin, "I will present you to the court. You will stand beside me, Seren, not as a commoner, as my queen." She had believed every syllable. Her hand drifted to her lower belly, where a truth she had not yet spoken grew beneath her racing heart. A truth she had planned to share 3 nights ago, before he stopped coming to her chamber. Before the silence began. The high priestess raised her ancient staff, and the hall fell deathly quiet. "The bloodlines have been consulted," the old woman intoned. "The stars have been read. The Alpha King of Arendor will now name his chosen." Seren's nails bit crescents into her palms. 5 women ascended the dais steps in gowns of winter white. Daughters of the great houses, each one groomed from birth for this possibility. Their faces blurred together in Serene's vision, indistinguishable shapes of silk and ambition. All except one. Vyloria of House Ashvale moved like a blade through water, her silver-gold hair cascading past her waist, her ice-pale eyes fixed upon Varen with predatory certainty. The Ashvales controlled the eastern territories, commanded 4,000 swords, and had buried 3 previous queens who stood between their bloodline and the throne. Seren watched Varen's face for any sign of the man she knew, any flicker of warmth, any glance toward the gallery where she hid. His expression could have been carved from granite. The mark on her hip, the secret claiming bite he had given her the night he swore she was his fated mate, began to burn. The burning spread through Seren's veins like slow poison. She remembered the first time she had felt this heat. 8 months ago, in the moonlit clearing beyond the castle's northern wall, when Varen had pressed her against an ancient oak and confessed that his wolf had chosen her the moment she entered his throne room. She had been brought before him as a healer. Nothing more. A commoner with gifted hands, summoned to treat a wound that refused to close. The king's advisors had lined the walls, impatient for her to finish so they could return to matters of actual importance. But Varen had looked at her, and something behind his eyes had shifted. "Leave us," he had commanded. His advisors had exchanged glances but obeyed, and when the doors closed, the most powerful wolf in the known world had taken her hand with fingers that quivered. "What is your name?" His voice had been rough, almost breathless. "Seren, your majesty. I am called Seren. He had repeated it like a prayer, like a man who had been dying of thirst and finally tasted rain. The months that followed existed outside of time. Secret meetings in the forest when the moon rose high. Whispered conversations that stretched until dawn. The slow, terrifying, exhilarating collapse of every wall between them. She learned that he hated the taste of wine but drank it at formal occasions because his father had. That he could name every star in the northern sky. That he woke from nightmares he refused to describe. And the only thing that calmed his wolf was her hand against his chest. He learned that she had taught herself to read from stolen books, that she hummed without realizing when she worked, that she had never been touched by any man before him. And when he finally asked permission to change that, she had pulled him down to her with an answer that needed no words. The claiming bite came on the winter solstice. Seren had not understood what it meant. She was not wolf-born, carried no pack blood in her veins, but Varen had explained with his mouth against her hip, his teeth grazing the sensitive flesh. "This mark binds you to me," he had murmured. "It tells my wolf that you are ours, that nothing in this world or any other can sever what we are to each other." The pain had been brief. The pleasure that followed had lasted until sunrise. She touched that mark now through the fabric of her dress, feeling its heat pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. With his heartbeat. For 8 months, she had felt him through this connection, his joy, his frustration, his consuming need for her presence. For 3 days she had felt nothing but cold. The secret growing in her womb stirred, as if responding to her distress. Seren had suspected for weeks, had confirmed it 3 days before Varen's silence began. She had practiced the words 100 times, imagining his face when she told him. She had imagined joy. Now, watching him stand rigid and remote on that dais, she wondered if she had imagined everything. The High Priestess turned to face the assembled crowd. "Speak the name, AlphaKing. Claim your queen before gods and wolves." Varen stepped forward. Seren's lungs forgot how to function. The mark on her hip flared with sudden, searing intensity, as if his movement had dragged a blade across the scar tissue. She gripped the curtain until her knuckles whitened, until the velvet threatened to tear beneath her fingers. His gaze swept the hall. It did not rise to the gallery. It did not search the shadows where she stood. It moved across the assembled nobles with the flat disinterest of a man examining livestock. "I claim," his voice rang out, hollow and strange, "Valoria of House Ashvale." The hall erupted. Cheers crashed against the ancient stones. Wolves howled their approval. Nobles embraced as political calculations resolved into satisfied smiles. The alliance that would bind the eastern territories to the crown for generations had been secured. Seren did not move. She watched Valoria ascend the final steps to stand beside Varen. Watched the silver-haired woman smile with triumph that bordered on cruelty. Watched Varen take her hand and raise it to his lips in the traditional gesture of acceptance. He did not hesitate. He did not flinch. He kissed another woman's knuckles while Seren stood in the shadows with his child growing beneath her heart and his mark burning on her flesh. Something inside her cracked, not collapsed. Cracked, clean and precise. Like ice forming a fault line that would hold until pressure found its weakness. She had prepared herself for many possibilities. She had imagined him explaining that political necessity required delay, had imagined him promising that this public choice meant nothing compared to their private truth, had even imagined him confessing that he had never loved her at all, that she had been a pleasant distraction and nothing more. She had not prepared for this, for the absolute absence of acknowledgement, for the totality of erasure, for the clear, undeniable truth that she had never existed in any version of his future. The Seren of yesterday might have sobbed, might have fled through the corridors with tears streaming down her face, might have collapsed in her chamber and waited for him to come to her with explanations, with apologies, With pretty lies she would have devoured like a starving creature. But yesterday's Seren had believed she was loved. Tonight's Seren understood that she had been a fool. She released the curtain, straightened her spine, pressed one palm flat against her belly where his air grew in secret silence. Below, the celebration continued without pause. Varen had already turned away, leading Vyloria toward the throne where they would receive congratulations from every noble house. He was smiling now. A small, distant curve of lips that looked nothing like the man who had laughed against her throat in moonlit clearings. Seren memorized that smile. Let it burn into her memory alongside every whispered promise, every gentle touch, every lie she had mistaken for love. Then she turned away from the gallery. She did not run, did not weep, did not make a single sound that might draw attention to the ghosts departing through servants' passages. Varen had expected her to beg. She knew this with absolute certainty. He had anticipated tears, confrontation, pleas that he could dismiss or console depending on his mood. Instead, she gave him nothing. By midnight, her chamber was empty. Her few possessions had vanished. The only evidence she had ever existed was a single hair ribbon on the pillow where she had once waited for a king who would never come again. Seren walked through the castle's eastern gate as the celebration bonfires painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. She did not look back. The celebration raged until dawn. Varen stood at the center of it, accepting congratulations from lords and ladies whose names blurred together like rain against glass. Valoria's hand rested on his arm with proprietary certainty, her voice a constant stream of words he could not seem to hear. Something was wrong. He had known it from the moment the High Priestess spoke his cue, had felt it when his mouth opened and sounds emerged that his mind had not commanded. His body had moved through the ceremony like a puppet guided by invisible strings, performing actions his wolf screamed against with increasing urgency. But his wolf was distant, muffled, trapped behind a wall of fog that Varen could not penetrate. "My king?" Valoria's voice cut through the haze. "You seem distracted." "Tired," he heard himself say. "The weight of the evening." She smiled, satisfied with the explanation, but her eyes held something else, something that looked almost like triumph. Varen excused himself as the first light of morning crept through the high windows. His feet carried him through corridors he knew by heart, past guards who bowed without meeting his gaze, toward a destination his clouded mind could not quite name. He stopped before a door in the servants' wing. Why was he here? This chamber belonged to no one of consequence. A healer, perhaps. Some common woman who had treated his wound months ago and been dismissed from his thoughts entirely. His hand rose to push open the door. The room was empty. Varen stood in the doorway, staring at the narrow bed, the cold hearth, the single hair ribbon coiled on the pillow like a sleeping serpent. The fog in his mind rippled. Something beneath it thrashed and howled, fighting to break through. A scent lingered in the air. Wildflowers and rain. Familiar. Essential. The most important fragrance in his existence, though he could not remember why. His chest began to ache. "Your Majesty?" A guard appeared behind him. "Lady Vyloria asks for your presence in the East Wing." Varen turned away from the empty room, but as he walked toward his future queen, his hand drifted to his chest, pressing against a pain that had no source. And somewhere deep beneath the fog, a wolf howled in anguish for something precious that had been lost. He did not understand. Not yet. 6 months later, the coastal village of Thornhaven had nearly forgotten its newest resident. Seren had arrived in the depths of winter, a young widow fleeing grief, or so she claimed. The village elders had noted her swollen belly and shadowed eyes and offered her the abandoned lighthouse keeper's cottage at the cliff's edge. In exchange, she would tend to their sick and injured, a fair trade for a woman with healing hands and nowhere else to go. She had accepted without hesitation. Now summer had arrived in full force, and Seren had become simply the healer who lived where the land met the sea. She delivered babies. She stitched wounds. She brewed remedies for ailments that had plagued families for generations. And every night, she stood at her window and watched the waves crash against the rocks below. One hand pressed to the swell where two lives grew instead of one. Twins. The midwife had confirmed it 2 months ago, her weathered hands pressing against Seren's belly with professional curiosity. 2 heartbeats, 2 futures, 2 pieces of Varen that would exist in the world regardless of his choices. Seren had wept that night. Not from sorrow, but from a complicated tangle of emotions she could not name. Joy and grief. Love and rage. Hope and the ashes of hope. All twisted together until she could not tell where one ended and another began. The mark on her hip had never stopped burning. She examined it each morning, watching the scar tissue darken rather than fade. Among wolfkind, she had learned, rejection severed the claiming bond completely. The mark should have disappeared within weeks, leaving smooth skin and bitter memories. Instead, it pulsed with heat that woke her at midnight. It flared when storms rolled in from the east, from the direction of Arendor. And sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, she could swear she felt something through it. A presence, a searching, a clawing need that was not her own. She told herself it was imagination, phantom sensations from a wound that refused to heal. Her mind inventing connection where none existed because the alternative, that Varen felt nothing at all, was too painful to accept. The babies kicked against her palm, 2 distinct rhythms that she had learned to distinguish. The boy favored her right side, always restless, always moving. The girl curled beneath her heart, quieter but somehow more insistent. "Your father does not know you exist," Seren whispered to them in the darkness. "And perhaps that is a mercy. Perhaps you are better off without a king who breaks his promises." She had stopped crying months ago, had stopped waiting for a messenger who would never arrive, had stopped dreaming of Varen coming to her with explanations that could undo what had been done. But she had not stopped remembering every tender word, every whispered vow, every moment when she had believed, with the totality of her foolish heart, that she had found someone who would never betray her. Those memories visited her like ghosts, and she had learned to let them pass without acknowledgement. The sea did not care about broken promises. The wind did not mourn for dreams. And Seren, daughter of no house and mother of a king's secret heirs, had learned to be as indifferent as the elements. Or so she told herself, on the nights when the mark burned brightest and sleep refused to come. The traders arrived with the heat of midsummer. Seren heard their wagons before she saw them, the creak of wooden wheels and the shouts of men unaccustomed to Thornhaven's narrow streets. She kept her distance, as she always did when outsiders visited. Too many questions invited too many lies, and she had grown weary of pretending to be someone she was not. But the news found her anyway. Mistress Wren? Young Torvin, the fisherman's son, appeared at her door with breathless excitement. He used the name she had given upon arrival, never questioning why a widow with healing gifts had no family name to claim. "What is it, child?" "The traders speak of Arendor." His eyes were wide with the thrill of distant drama. "They say the AlphaKing has gone mad." Seren's heart stopped, restarted, continued beating through sheer force of will. "Mad?" She kept her voice carefully neutral. "Completely." Torvin practically vibrated with the gossip. "They say he tore apart the eastern wing of his own castle with his bare hands, that he has not slept in months, that his wolf has taken control so completely that his own council fears to be in the same room with him." The mark on her hip flared with sudden heat. Seren gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "And the queen?" The word tasted like poison on her tongue. "What of Lady Valoria?" "That is the strangest part." Torvin leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a sacred secret. The king has not touched her. Not once. The traders say she remains in her chambers, untouched and furious, while the king searches for someone else entirely. Someone else? A woman. No one knows who she is or what she did to earn his obsession. But the king has deployed every wolf in his command to find her. He has offered rewards that could buy a lordship. He has threatened to burn down any village that shelters her. Seren's legs threaten to buckle. The crops are failing in the southern provinces. Torvin continued, oblivious to her distress. The pack bonds are fraying. Wolves have begun attacking their own kin. The traders say the kingdom itself is dying, and it will not stop until the king finds whatever he has lost. Perhaps he should not have discarded it so carelessly. The words escaped before Seren could stop them. Torvin blinked. Mistress? Nothing. Thank you for the news. You should return to your father. She closed the door before he could respond. Alone in her cottage, Seren pressed her back against the wood and slid to the floor. Her hands found her belly, cradling the children who had begun to move at the mention of their father. He was searching for her. 6 months of silence, 6 months of believing she meant nothing. And now she learned that Varen had been tearing his kingdom apart trying to find the woman he had publicly discarded without a second glance. It made no sense, unless something had been terribly wrong that night. The mark on her hip pulsed with heat, and for the first time since she had walked away from Arendor, Seren allowed herself to wonder if the man who chose Valoria had truly been Varen at all. The babies kicked in tandem, as if urging her toward a truth she was not ready to face. 3 days after the traders departed, the wolves arrived. Seren sensed them before she saw them. The mark on her hip flared with warning heat, dragging her from restless sleep into immediate alertness. She moved to the window, one hand pressed to her belly, and watched 3 shapes emerge from the tree line beyond her cottage. Not wild wolves. These were too large, too deliberate, their eyes gleaming with intelligence that no natural creature possessed. They had found her. Seren's mind raced through possibilities. The back door led to the cliffs, a dead end. The root cellar was hidden, but a wolf's nose would find her within moments. She was 8 months pregnant with twins, unable to run, unable to fight. She was trapped. The knock at her door was almost polite. Mistress Wren. A male voice, calm and measured. Please open the door. I swear on my blood and bond that we mean you no harm. She had no options left. She opened the door. 3 men stood on her threshold. 2 were warriors, their hulking frames and coiled readiness marking them as royal guard. But the 3rd man commanded her attention entirely. He was perhaps 50 winters old, his dark hair silvered at the temples, his face carved with lines that spoke of decades in service. And his eyes, a deep gold that seemed to hold centuries of secrets, looked at her with something that resembled reverence. My lady. He bowed deeply. I am Caldris, first beta to the Alpha King. I have been searching for you since the night you disappeared. I think you have made a mistake. Seren kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. My name is Wren. I am a healer. Nothing more. You are Seren, daughter of no house, formerly a healer in the royal castle. Caldris straightened, his gaze dropping briefly to her swollen belly. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left hip and his children in your womb. The world tilted beneath her feet. How do you know about the children? Because the king has dreamed of them every night since you vanished. 2 heartbeats, 2 souls. He wakes screaming their names, though he has never heard them spoken. Caldris paused. May I come in? What I have to tell you cannot be shared on a doorstep. Seren stepped aside. Caldris entered alone, leaving the guards at the threshold. The night of the sovereign's claim, he said quietly, someone poisoned the king. Seren's breath caught. What? A compound we have only recently identified, moonshade extract mixed with crushed vervain and something else we still cannot name. It did not merely cloud his judgment, it severed his connection to his wolf entirely, made him a puppet whose strings could be pulled by anyone who whispered in his ear. That cannot be true. But even as she spoke, pieces began sliding into place, the flat emptiness in his eyes, the mechanical quality of his movements, the complete absence of recognition when he looked across the hall where she had hidden. We thought so too, Caldress agreed, until the compound began to fade 3 days after the ceremony. The king woke in chambers he did not remember entering, beside a woman he had no memory of choosing, with his wolf howling in agony and his bond screaming for a mate who had vanished without a trace. Seren's hand found the wall for support. The first thing he did, Caldress continued, was run to your chamber. When he found it empty, when he realized you were gone, he tore apart the eastern wing with his bare hands trying to find your scent. He has not stopped searching since. The mark on her hip flared with sudden heat, as if responding to the truth finally being spoken. Who did this? She demanded. Who poisoned him? House Ashvel. Caldress's voice hardened to steel. We have found evidence that Vailoria's family has been planning this for years. He withdrew a folded letter from his coat. This was intercepted by one of my wolves 2 weeks ago. Seren took the paper with numb fingers. The seal was broken, but the Ashvale crest remained visible in the dark wax. The message inside was 3 lines. The healer has been located. The problem will be eliminated before the twins draw breath. Long live Queen Valoria. Ice flooded her veins. Assassins, she whispered, already dispatched. Caldress's expression was grim. My lady, we must leave tonight. The king is traveling to meet us, but the Ashvales have spies everywhere. If their killers reach you before he does... A howl split the evening air. Caldress was on his feet instantly, his body shifting into battle readiness. Through the window, Seren saw shadows moving between the trees. Not the silver-furred wolves who had accompanied the beta. These were darker. Faster. Their movements coordinated with predatory precision. The Ashvale assassins had arrived first. The first arrow shattered Seren's window before she could scream. Caldress moved with supernatural speed, shoving her toward the back of the cottage as glass exploded across the floor. The 2 guards burst through the front door, already shifting, their human forms dissolving into enormous wolves that lunged toward the tree line. The cellar, Caldress commanded. Now. There is no escape from the cellar. You only need to survive until the king arrives. His eyes had gone full gold, his wolf pressing against the surface. He is close. He can feel you through the bond. Another arrow punched through the wooden wall. Seren saw the gleaming liquid on its tip. Poison. They were not trying to capture her. They were trying to end her quickly before Vorin could reach her. A scream erupted from outside. One of the guards, silenced mid-howl. Go, Caldress snarled. And then he was shifting, his body exploding into wolf form as he crashed through the ruined window to join the battle. Seren stood frozen in her destroyed cottage. Through the shattered glass, she could see chaos, wolves tearing at wolves, the flash of silver blades, blood staining the summer grass. They were losing. She could see it in the way Caldress fought, outnumbered and slowing. Could see it in the dark shapes that circled ever closer, while the beta struggled to hold them back. The cellar door was 3 steps away. She could hide, could pray, could wait in the darkness while wolves died to protect her. But the woman who had walked silently out of Arendor 6 months ago had not survived by cowering. Seren closed her eyes. The power had always been there. She had felt it stirring since childhood, a warmth in her chest that emerged when she healed wounds, when she eased fevers, when she coaxed life back into bodies that had begun to fade. She had been warned never to reveal its full extent. Common women with uncommon gifts drew dangerous attention, but she was already marked for death. Her children were already targeted. and she would not let them die in a cellar while she hid from what she truly was. The warmth expanded. Golden light bloomed between her palms, brighter than any candle, purer than any flame. It spread up her arms, across her shoulders, until her entire body glowed like a fallen star. Seren stepped through the shattered window into the chaos of battle. Every wolf in the clearing froze. Caldris, bleeding from a dozen wounds, stared at her with something like awe. The dark wolves circling him hesitated, their formation breaking as instinct warred with training. "You will not have them." Seren's voice carried harmonics that resonated in the bones of every creature present. "Not him. Not my children. Not anyone under my protection." She walked toward Caldris, her bare feet leaving prints of light in the blood-soaked grass. The nearest assassin wolf lunged at her with jaws spread wide. The golden light flared like sunrise. The wolf was thrown backward with a yelp of agony, its dark fur smoking where her power had touched it. It scrambled upright and fled into the trees, followed by two of its pack-mates. But not all of them ran. A figure emerged from the shadows at the clearing's edge. Female, dressed in black leather, her face hidden behind a mask carved from wolf bone, but her silver-gold hair unmistakable in the fading light. "Impressive," Valoria said. "The king's little healer has claws after all." She raised a crossbow, its bolt gleaming with the same poison that had coated the arrows. But claws cannot stop what is already in flight. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The forest exploded. Trees splintered like kindling as something crashed through the undergrowth. The ground shook with the force of its approach, the remaining assassin wolves scattered in pure, primal terror. Valoria spun toward the sound, her crossbow swinging to track the new threat. She was not fast enough. A wolf the size of a war horse erupted from the tree line, its fur black as a moonless night, its eyes blazing with molten gold. It crossed the clearing in a single bound. Its jaws closed around Valoria's crossbow arm with devastating precision. The woman's scream was cut short as the great wolf shook her once, twice, then flung her broken body into the darkness. It turned in a circle, searching for more threats, finding none. Then those burning eyes fixed on Seren. She could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the creature that radiated power like heat from a forge. The wolf approached her slowly. Blood dripped from its muzzle. Its body blocked out the starlight, and then it pressed its nose gently to her belly. The twins exploded into movement, kicking frantically against their father's touch. The wolf made a sound that was almost a sob. "Varen," Seren whispered. The shift happened between heartbeats. One moment, a wolf. The next, a man kneeling in the blood-soaked grass, his hands hovering over her stomach as if afraid to touch. He looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "You are alive," he breathed. "You are alive, and you are—" His voice broke completely. "Ours," she finished quietly. "They are ours." Seren had imagined this moment countless times. She had imagined rage, imagined cold satisfaction at his suffering, imagined making him grovel for forgiveness while she stood above him, untouchable and unmoved. She had never imagined him weeping at her feet, his entire body shaking, his hands cradling her belly with a tenderness that broke every wall she had built. "May I?" he asked, his voice wrecked. "May I touch them?" The Alpha King of Arendor, the most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms, was asking permission to feel his own children move. Seren took his hands and pressed them flat against her stomach. The twins responded immediately, kicks coming from both sides, as if competing for their father's attention. Varen made a choked sound, his forehead dropping to rest against her belly. "I felt them," he whispered. "Every night. In dreams I could not understand. 2 heartbeats that were not mine, 2 souls calling out for something I could not name. Varen, I searched everywhere." The words poured out of him like blood from a wound. every village, every forest, every corner of the kingdom. My wolf was dying, Seren. Every day without you, every hour without your scent. I could feel myself becoming something monstrous. You chose her. The accusation emerged before she could stop it, carrying 6 months of grief. I watched you take her hand. I watched you kiss her knuckles while I stood in the shadows with your children inside me. Varen flinched as if she had struck him. I remember nothing. His voice cracked. I swear to you, on my blood and bond, I remember nothing of that night. The last clear memory I have is drinking wine with my council before the ceremony. The next thing I knew, I was walking in chambers I did not recognize, beside a woman I despised, with my wolf screaming your name. Convenient. But the word held less venom than she intended. Varen rose to his feet, and she saw the full extent of his deterioration, the hollows beneath his eyes, the gauntness of his cheeks, the way his hands shook even now. You think any part of this has been convenient? I have not slept in 6 months. My kingdom is crumbling, my wolves are going feral, and my own council believes I have gone mad. Perhaps you have. Yes. The admission was raw. I have, because the woman I love disappeared without a single word, and I could not remember why. Because I woke to find I had been used as a puppet to destroy everything precious to me. He stepped closer, his hands rising to cup her face. I did not choose her, Seren. I would never choose anyone but you. The bond we share, the mark I gave you, and those are eternal, unbreakable. The Ashvales tried to sever what exists between us, and all they accomplished was proving that nothing in this world can keep us apart. Seren felt the walls around her heart beginning to crack. I left without a word, she said quietly. You expected me to beg, to weep, to make a scene that you could dismiss or comfort. Yes. The confession held no defense. Instead, you walked away in silence, and that silence nearly killed me, Seren, because it meant you believed I was not worth fighting for. Tears burned in her eyes. I believed you had thrown me away. I know. His voice was barely audible. And I would give anything to undo what was done to us, but I cannot. All I can offer is the truth. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped searching. And I will spend every remaining breath proving that you are the only queen my heart has ever known. The mark on her hip pulsed with sudden warmth, and she felt his answering pulse through the bond. Not the cold emptiness of the past 6 months. Something else entirely. Hope. Serene reached up and touched his face for the first time since she had left Arendor. I do not know if I can forgive what happened, she said honestly. I do not know if the wound will ever fully heal. Varen's eyes closed in pain. But I believe you, she continued. I believe you were violated. I believe the man who chose Valoria was not you, and I believe you came for me. Always. His voice broke on the word. I will always come for you. They rode through the night toward Arendor. Seren sat before Varen on his black stallion, his arms wrapped protectively around her, his chest warm against her back. She had protested the arrangement, but he had simply lifted her onto the saddle and silenced her objections with a look that held more vulnerability than command. My wolf needs you close, he had murmured. 6 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. Please, let me have this. So she had relented, leaning back against him as the horse carried them toward a kingdom in chaos. They were not alone. Caldris rode beside them, his wounds healing with supernatural speed now that his king was present and stable. A dozen wolves flanked their party, eyes constantly scanning the darkness for threats. But within the protective circle there was something almost like peace. Tell me about them, Varen said softly, his hand resting on her belly. Tell me about our children. Seren smiled despite everything. The boy is restless. He moves constantly, as if he cannot wait to enter the world and begin causing trouble. Varen's chest rumbled with quiet laughter. He sounds familiar. The girl is quieter, but there is something fierce in her, something that refuses to be overlooked. Seren covered his hand with her own. She will be a force, I think. A queen in her own right. Like her mother. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. I am not a queen, Seren said carefully. I am a healer, a commoner. You carry my heirs. Varen's voice was firm. You hold my claiming mark. You are my fated mate, recognized by my wolf before I knew your name. Those facts make you more royal than any noble daughter who has ever lived. The council will accept what I command them to accept. His arms tightened around her. I have spent 6 months watching my kingdom crumble without you. Do you think I would sacrifice one more moment of our lives together for their approval? Seren turned in the saddle to look at him. In the moonlight, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the determination in his wolf-bright eyes. The Ashvales will not surrender their claim, she said. Valoria may be injured, but her family controls half the eastern territories. They will see this as war. It has always been war. Varen's jaw tightened. They simply made the mistake of thinking I was the only enemy they needed to defeat. They did not count on you. On me? The power you showed tonight, Seren. His voice held awe. I felt it through the bond before I ever saw it. Golden light. Ancient magic. Something rare and precious. Seren leaned her forehead against his. Together, she said. And for the first time in 6 months, the mark on her hip did not burn with pain. It glowed with warmth. They reached the borders of Arendor as dawn painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. The kingdom spread before them, familiar and foreign all at once. Seren remembered these rolling hills, these ancient forests, the distant spires of the capital rising against the horizon, but something was wrong. Smoke rose from villages that should have been peaceful. The distant sound of howling carried on the wind, mournful and constant. And on the great banner that should have flown above the capital gates, the royal crest had been replaced by the silver serpent of House Ashvale. No. Varen's voice was deadly quiet. They would not dare. Caldris pulled his horse alongside them. My king, my scouts report that Lord Ashvale seized the palace 2 days ago. He claims you have been compromised by dark magic, that the woman you seek has corrupted your mind. And the people believe this? Some do. Others resist. Caldris hesitated. There is more. Ashvale has taken hostages, servants and guards who refuse to renounce their loyalty to you. He plans to execute them at midday as traitors. Seren's blood turned to ice. How many? 43, including the old healer who trained you, my lady, the one called Mira. Mira. The name struck Seren like a physical blow. Mira, who had taught her everything. Who had covered for her absences when she slipped away to meet Varen. Who had guessed the truth and never breathed a word. We have to save them. Varen looked down at her. Seren, you cannot enter that city. If the Ashvales capture you, if we do nothing, 43 innocent people die. I will not have their blood on my hands. The children are safer with me fighting for them than hiding while others die in my place. Seren held his gaze without flinching. I am done running, Varen. For a long moment the AlphaKing studied her face. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his features. Fierce. Proud. My queen, he murmured. He turned to address the wolves assembled behind them. The Ashvales believe they have won. They are wrong. Today, we take back what is ours. A howl rose from the assembled wolves, dozens of voices joining in a chorus of righteous fury. They breached the outer walls within an hour. Seren remained at the rear of the assault, protected by a ring of loyal wolves, but she could feel everything through the bond. Varen's rage as he tore through Ashvale defenders, his grief when he found servants who had died rather than betray him. But as the sun climbed toward its zenith, a messenger came running. "My lady, Lord Ashvale has barricaded himself in the great sanctum with the hostages. He says if the king does not surrender, he will kill them all." Seren was moving before anyone could stop her. The great sanctum doors stood open. She did not wait for permission. Seren walked into the great sanctum alone. 43 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound. Armed soldiers stood behind them with blades drawn. And on the throne that belonged to Varen sat Lord Aldrich Ashvale. Beside him stood Valoria, her arm bandaged, but her smile intact. "So the healer comes crawling back," Valoria said. Seren ignored her. Her gaze found Mira among the hostages. Run, child," the old healer whispered. "I am done running." Seren turned to face Lord Ashvale. "You want the king to surrender. I offer you something more valuable." Ashvale's eyebrow rose. "And what might that be?" "Me." Seren placed both hands on her belly. "The king's mate and his unborn heirs. Take me as your hostage. Release the others." "No." Varen's roar echoed from beyond the doors, but Ashvale was smiling. "An interesting proposition. Take her. Release the prisoners." As rough hands gripped her arms, the hostages were cut free, stumbling toward the doors. Mira tried to reach her, but soldiers pushed the old healer back. "Foolish girl," Valoria hissed, stalking toward her. "Did you think your sacrifice would save anyone? Once my father has you, the king will surrender. And then we will kill you all anyway." She raised her hand to strike Seren's face. The twins chose that moment to awaken. Power exploded from Seren's belly, golden light erupting outward in a wave that threw Valoria across the room. But this was not Seren's magic. This was something ancient and primal. Her children were protecting their mother. And in doing so, they triggered the transformation she had been fighting since the night Varen first bit her. Seren screamed as her bones began to break. The pain was unlike anything Seren had ever experienced. Every bone in her body reformed. Every muscle rebuilt itself. Her skin rippled as fur pushed through from beneath. She collapsed to the marble floor, her scream transforming into a howl that shook the ancient stones. Through the agony, she was aware of the doors exploding inward. Varen burst through in full wolf form, his great black body hurtling toward her, even as her own body continued to change. Ashvale soldiers rushed to intercept him. Valoria screamed commands. Chaos erupted on every side. The twins pulsed with power inside her, their magic guiding the change, easing the agony, reshaping her into something she had never imagined she could become. When it was finished, she rose on 4 legs. Her fur was the color of sunlit gold, her eyes blazing with inner fire. She was smaller than Varen's form, but radiated a light that made every wolf in the room pause. Lord Ashvale had recovered his footing, a silver blade gleaming in his hand. He lunged toward her. Seren did not flinch. The golden light erupted from her wolf form in a blinding wave. Ashvale was thrown backward, his sword clattering across the marble, his body crashing against the throne. Varen reached her side, his black fur pressing against her gold. Through the bond, she felt his overwhelming emotion. Awe, relief, fierce, primal pride. "You shifted," his voice echoed in her mind. "Serene, you shifted." "Our children helped me," she replied. "They protected us." Valoria had retrieved a crossbow from a fallen guard, its bolt aimed directly at Seren's heart. "If I cannot have the throne," she snarled, "then neither will he." Her finger tightened on the trigger. Seren moved without thinking. The magic propelled her forward in a blur of golden light. Her jaws closed around Valoria's wrist before the bolt could fly. The woman screamed as Seren bore her to the ground. "Yield," Seren commanded. "Your family has lost. Yield, or I will end this permanently." The fight drained from Valoria's body. She went limp, defeated at last. The formal ceremony took place 3 days later. Seren stood in the great sanctum, the same hall where she had once hidden in shadows. But today, she stood in the light, wearing a gown of gold and white, her claiming mark displayed without shame. Varen stood beside her, his hand clasped in hers. Before the assembled packs of Arendor, the High Priestess intoned, "Do you, Varen, AlphaKing, confirm this woman as your true mate? Your chosen queen?" "I confirm it," Varen said. "From the moment my wolf recognized her until the last beat of my heart, she is mine, and I am hers." "And do you, Seren, accept this bond?" Seren looked at Varen, at the man who had searched for her across kingdoms, who had fought through poison and politics to find her. "I accept," she said. "I claim him as he claimed me, now and forever." Varen tilted his head, exposing his throat. "Claim me," he whispered. "Make us whole." Seren leaned forward and let her teeth sink into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain, it was completion. 2 halves of a soul becoming one. She felt his memories flood through her, the agony of waking without her, the search, the slow descent toward madness. And he felt hers, the devastation of watching him choose another, the lonely exile, the transformation from victim to queen. When she finally released him, they were both shaking. "My queen," he breathed. "My king," she answered. 6 weeks later, Seren gave birth to twins. The boy came first, announcing himself with a cry that echoed through the palace. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's golden eyes. When the midwife placed him in Varen's arms, the AlphaKing wept openly. The girl followed moments later, quieter but no less fierce. Seren held them both against her chest. "We need names," she murmured. "Kaelin," Varen said quietly. "For my grandfather, who believed that true mates were worth more than any political alliance." "And the girl?" "That choice should be yours." Seren looked down at her daughter, at the fierce little spirit who had helped trigger her transformation. "Aurelia," she decided, "for the golden light that saved us both." The Ashvales faced judgment before the assembled packs. Lord Aldrich was executed for his crimes. Valoria was exiled to the frozen northern wastes, stripped of her name and her wolf. The kingdom healed. The crops grew again. The wolves who had gone feral returned to their senses as the bond between their king and queen radiated peace throughout the realm. And on quiet evenings, when the twins slept and the palace had fallen silent, Varen would pull Seren close. "Thank you," he would whisper, "for believing in us when I had given you every reason not to." Seren would run her fingers through his hair, feeling the bond that pulsed between them. "I never stopped believing," she would answer. "Even in the silence, some part of me always knew." She had walked away without a word, and her silence had nearly destroyed them both. But in the end, that silence had spoken louder than any plea. It had forced Varen to confront what he had lost. It had given her the strength to rebuild herself. And it had proven that their bond could survive even the cruelest attempts to sever it. They had found each other against all odds, and they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.